Kuwait's loyal friend, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, who sat on the throne of one of the greatest empires, has passed away a week ago at the age of 96 in Balmoral Castle, leaving behind a glorious history and a great legacy that will remain forever. Her reign of 70 years is the longest of any British monarch, the longest recorded of any female head of state, and the second longest of any monarch in history. Queen Elizabeth Alexandra Mary was born on April 21, 1926. She is the daughter of King George VI and Queen Elizabeth I. She married Prince Philip Mountbatten on November 20, 1947, and became Queen of the United Kingdom on February 6, 1952, and was officially crowned on June 2, 1953.
There are many important milestones during the long reign of 70 years of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Of course, starting in February 1952, when her father George VI passed away, the young Queen was on tour in Kenya with her husband when she became Queen and hurried back to the UK as quickly as she could. Another important milestone was her coronation in 1953, and this was the first time that a British coronation had been televised. And it was an opportunity for people the length and breadth of the United Kingdom to gather together around TV sets in their neighbours' houses, all clustering together to watch this hugely important occasion. Something that I have found personally very interesting about Her Majesty's reign was that she was apparently the first British Queen to give birth without the Home Secretary present. So we can see at different points in her reign, her life was becoming increasingly modern and perhaps a little bit more similar to those of the people that she was presiding over and reigning for and serving. We also have another important milestone in 2015, in February, when Her Majesty became the longest serving British monarch, overtaking Queen Victoria. And then, of course, she became the first British monarch to reach a platinum jubilee in February 2022. And it's been a wonderful few months up until this point in the year where we've been able to celebrate in lots of different ways her platinum jubilee. But I think what is very striking about Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II's reign is, although there are lots of important milestones, it's really this sense of continuity, of steadiness, of always being there for her people. It's the sense of selfless, lifelong devotion through all the ups and downs. That's what really stays, I think, with the British people and with many, many people across the world.
The special case that brought together the late Queen Elizabeth II and the state of Kuwait, its leadership and its people, started in 1899, which was the year that witnessed the signing of the bilateral document between Kuwait and Britain. Now, after the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, King Charles III will complete the journey of those unique relations between the two countries that lasted more than 12 decades. Kuwait and Britain's relations went through various phases. The first was with Sheikh Mohammed Mbarak al-Sabah, who signed the document of the British political resident in the Gulf. Then came the independence document of Kuwait in the presence of the late Sheikh Abdullah Salim al-Sabah in 1961. The late Queen reign has witnessed 6 Kuwaiti rulers, His Highness Emir Sheikh Nawaf Ahmed al-Jabir al-Sabah, and 5 deceased rulers. The late Emir Sheikh Abdullah Salim al-Sabah, who attended her coronation ceremony following her rise to the British throne. The late Emir Sheikh Sabah al-Salim, the late Emir Sheikh Jabir al-Ahmed, the late Emir Sheikh Saad al-Abdullah, and the late Emir Sheikh Sabah al-Ahmed. In a clear indication of the importance of the state of Kuwait, Queen Elizabeth II and her husband, Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, made a historic state visit to Kuwait in February 1979. She was the first royal figure to visit the Gulf region, where she was received by the late Emir Sheikh Jabir Ahmed al-Sabah. At that time, Queen Elizabeth was the first official guest to visit the newly built Kuwait Towers before its opening to the public. Not only Kuwait International Airport and Kuwait Towers were inaugurated on this visit, but also oil production began in one of the Ahmadi fields. While Queen Elizabeth II was the first to land her plane at Kuwait International Airport, she was also the first to leave by sea from the port of Shuwaykh.
Queen Elizabeth II's visit to Kuwait in 1979 was a very interesting one. And it seemed to have been something that she really enjoyed. Looking back at the old photographs, there are a number of snaps of Her Majesty where she's looking at the camera, and it's a formal portrait photograph. But there are a number of photographs that capture her almost when she feels sort of more relaxed, perhaps a little off duty, and she's sharing a joke and not looking at the camera, and she's always smiling. She seems to be very interested in what's going on around her. So Her Majesty arrived in Kuwait by Concorde in 1979 for her visit. This was the first time that Concorde had landed in Kuwait. Her Majesty was the first official visitor to be welcomed on her arrival at the newly opened Kuwait International Airport. And she had a look around. She watched some sporting activities and different cultural events from the shelter of a traditional tent. She was greeted at the Towers by a magnificent choir, and she seems to have really enjoyed herself. Another thing that is very striking in the photographs of this visit in 1979 is the dress that Her Majesty wore for the official dinner. It's a beautiful dress of a striking blue and white material, and Her Majesty named the dress Kuwait, and it was designed particularly for that visit to reflect the colours of the Kuwait Towers. She then set sail for Bahrain after her visit to Kuwait on the Royal Yacht Britannia at the end of what seems to have been a wonderful and very memorable visit.
The visit of the late Emir Sheikh Sabah Ahmed Al Jaber Al Sabah to the United Kingdom in 2012 is considered one of the most important visits in the Kuwaiti-British relations. The Queen awarded Sheikh Sabah Ahmed the Grand Order of the Ba'ath class in honor and appreciation of the strong ties and relations between the two friendly countries. This visit was not the first official Emir visit to the United Kingdom, as the first was in 1919 by the late Sheikh Ahmed Al Jaber Al Sabah, and the second official visit was by the late Sheikh Abdullah Salim in 1953. And there is also the third visit by the late Sheikh Jaber Ahmed in 1995, and finally the late Emir Sheikh Sabah Ahmed Al Sabah in 2012.
The state visit of the late Emir Sheikh Sabah in 2012 wasn't the first state visit to the UK. In 1995, Sheikh Jabir Al Ahmed visited Her Majesty the Queen in Windsor and also had a wonderful visit. But just looking back at the old photographs again and reading the records of the state visit in 2012, it seems that this was a very meaningful step forward in the relationship and really helped to bond those two families, the royal family and the ruling family, together. We've seen that a number of agreements, important agreements in the field of education and investment and security as well, were signed during that visit. Her Majesty the Queen awarded a very significant honour to the late Emir from the Order of the Bath. And there was a very grand ceremony held at Windsor Castle where everybody looks magnificent in their gowns and their robes. And it seems again that those two heads of state really enjoyed each other's company. It's wonderful looking back at those photos.
The late Queen Elizabeth II holds a special place in the hearts of the Kuwaiti people, as she was known for her continuous support and her close relations with Kuwaiti political leaders during the stages of her reign, as well as the support of the late British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher during the brutal Iraqi invasion in 1990, when Britain contributed a force of more than 45,000 soldiers and 69 fighter planes in Operation Desert Storm to help liberate Kuwait.
So the relationship between Kuwait and the United Kingdom changed quite significantly during the course of Elizabeth II's reign. In 1961, when Kuwait became independent, previously it had been a British protectorate. But what is very interesting is that that enduring friendship between the two countries remained. It didn't waver for a moment, and even just a number of weeks after Kuwait achieved its independence in 1961, there was a threat to its independence, a threat to its sovereignty from its neighbour Iraq, and immediately the United Kingdom was there to support its friend and ally Kuwait, who sent a number of military personnel and military assets to help protect its friend. So even though our constitutional relationship had changed, we stayed acting in partnership and in a spirit of friendship. And of course in 1990 and 1991, we showed again the strength, the enduring strength of the relationship between the UK and Kuwait, where we were a leading voice in the United Nations, trying to find a political and diplomatic solution to avoid the use of force. Unfortunately, that wasn't possible. And then in 1990, the UK and British forces were a very important component in the coalition forces that liberated Iraq. So our relationship has been tested a number of times. During the course of 1990, the UK was a leading voice in terms of trying to find a political and diplomatic solution at the United Nations to avoid the use of force. Unfortunately, that wasn't possible, and in 1991, the UK was an important part of the coalition to liberate Kuwait. So we have been tested a number of times in terms of our friendship and our loyalty to Kuwait during Elizabeth II's reign, and we have always come through for our friend and ally.
Decades passed in which the connection of the two countries was embodied in more than one scene that emphasized the depth of this bond. The partnership branched out with an insight that looked forward to a broader prospect on the basis of cooperation and integration culturally, politically, and economically. Despite the geographical distance between the two countries and the differences in language, customs, and traditions, these factors did not prevent this exceptional relation between the state of Kuwait and the United Kingdom. "123 years of relations that deepened over time and was built on firm foundations through the reign of the late Queen Elizabeth II, may her soul rest in peace. We will forever remember the great legacy of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, who was a friend and an ally to the state of Kuwait's leadership, government, and its people.